Frank, what's the weirdest thing you've ever saw in here?
Let me ask you a question, kid. Did you see that movie, Night of the Living Dead?
Hey, we gonna party tonight or what?
Yeah, we are gonna party.
Well, where are we gonna party?
I don't know, somewhere.
Hey, we could go to the park.
Oh, no, we can't. The cops said they'd shoot us if we go back to the park.
Yeah, and I ain't in no mood to die tonight.
I like death.
Greetings, ghouls, and welcome to minute 32 of Do You Want to Party, the Movies by Minute podcast for the 1985 groundbreaking horror classic, The Return of the Living Dead. I'm your host, Troy, and joining me this episode is a recent contributor to the podcast via our comment section and a fellow horror podcast.
Hi, I'm John from the podcast Half Price Horror, and I covered this for myself for my 25th episode. So it's a classic, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about it with you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's great to have, someone who knows the movie pretty well and who was actually into horror movies to begin with. So you mentioned in your podcast a little bit of how you came to this movie and all that. If you just want to explain that to the audience here, how you came about discovering this movie for yourself.
Sure. I kind of think that every horror fan has a movie that they came to when they were way too young to be able to process it correctly. And afterwards, every horror movie has kind of seemed a little tame by comparison. Return of the Living Dead was that movie for me. I saw it when I was 10. It had probably just come out on VHS at the time. It was probably right after its release. And I was over at a sleepover. It was someone who should not have been renting that movie. And it traumatized me so bad that I could still remember entire sequences decades later.
Nice. Exactly. The same way, not for this particular movie, but my first modern day horror film took me 3 attempts to get past the first 20 minutes, and that was An American Werewolf in London. I never made it past the first werewolf attack sequence because the sound and whatnot just terrified me beyond. And I think I was maybe 12 at the time when that was first available. So yeah. But yeah, again, once I discovered this movie quickly became really high up on my list of favorite horror films when I started to get into the modern horror film. All right, so we're just going to start into this with minute 32. Starts with Ernie rejecting the weasels and ends with Ernie taking a vow. So the minute starts with Ernie finishing off his comprehension of Bert's situation.
You don't run a pet store.
Signaling with his thumb for the sick creatures to be removed from his place of work.
So some lab animals got rabies. Come on, guys, take them to the pound.
All this time, Bert is rubbing his lower lip while contemplating Ernie's suggestion. For the first time, Bert isn't running his fingers through his hair to think of something. After a brief pause, he turns to reason with Ernie and make him understand how restricted his actions are with this predicament.
Well, I just can't do that. You gotta take my word for it.
All this time, in the background, you can hear the plastic bags wriggling. Concluding that Bert isn't going to use his suggestions, he asks for Bert's next step.
What the hell do you want me to do?
And when Bert matter-of-factly mentions the crematorium...
You have a crematorium, right?
Ernie fiercely questions Bert's suggestion.
You want to burn them?
Joyfully, Bert responds to Ernie's protested question.
Yeah, that's what I had in mind, actually.
Unsure of if it's a joke or not, Ernie mentions how inhumane that act would be.
That's cruel.
Bert mentions how he's out of options.
Well, I can't think of anything else to do, Ernie.
Stammering, Ernie claims how uncivilized the act would be.
You just can't burn animals alive. It's just too hideous.
Reaching for his holstered weapon, Ernie offers his services to end the sick creature's suffering before dispatching of the remains.
At least let me kill them first. Take them out in the parking lot and put them out of their misery.
Bert and Frank share a knowing look at each other. Then Bert concludes the lack of effect of Ernie's suggestion that would happen to the rabid weasels.
I don't think that'd work, Ernie.
Running the situation through his head, gun still drawn, Ernie stammers at a question about how little of an effect it would be to shoot the animals.
I don't understand what's going on. Well, why not?
As he reholsters his gun, Bert and Frank look at each other again. Then both men approach Ernie, flanking him on either side. Bert cautiously steps over the edge of the wriggling pile of bags. Freddy stays put, his head hanging low. He still props himself up on the counter. Stiff-armed with his shoulders slightly hunched, Frank reaches Ernie at the same time as Bert. Bert asks Ernie of his ability to keep things to himself.
Can you swear to keep a secret, Ernie?
Looking from Bert to the pile, he says he's unsure.
At this point, I don't know.
Frank raises his right hand, bending at the elbow. Bert insists that he must be certain.
No, you got to swear. You got to. I can't tell you.
Ernie looks from him, Bert, to Frank, who now has his left hand over his heart, concludes that he has no other choice. He shakes his head and complies to Bert's request.
All right. I swear. Good.
And while nothing really majorly happened, that wraps up what actually physically happens in that particular minute. Now, do you have any observations about this particular minute, if you can remember what it was and all that?
Well, I think the first thing that I always notice is just how good the chemistry is between Clu Gulager and Don Calfa. If you didn't know any better, you would swear that they were hired because they'd done a dozen other movies together and they're old friends. It just feels like they know each other. It feels like they've got this whole backstory.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Don Calfa, he really turns this role into something more than what it could have been. The way he says, I could just go out and shoot him in the parking lot while gesturing with the gun is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that keeps coming up in previous minutes of the podcast, how the cast seems so well intertwined with each other and they beautifully mesh together. Now, of course, we know that like 90% of the cast all had like a 2-week period to rehearse the whole entire film from start to finish. And Clu Gallagher was actually like a last minute hire who came in, like was hired the day they started filming practically. So he didn't have that time to like meld with the rest of the cast. But again, Clu Gallagher being the type of actor that he beautifully fits into this character. And like you said, him and Don work fantastically together. And it is kind of like it is Bert and Ernie. They do have this 25-year relationship with each other. They know how to talk around each other. They know how to kid or like joke with each other and all that sort of thing. And it just makes the world seem so real when the characters have that sort of interaction with each other.
And the other thing I really want to point out is James Karen and Tom Matthews don't have any dialogue in this minute, but they are very much a presence. Like the way that they're reacting to this conversation really sells the tension of the moment because they know what's in those bags and they know that this is kind of the only way that they can get out of what feels like a very deep hole. So their reactions to the conversation, their facial acting really sells this whole moment. And it's just fantastic. You see a lot of actors who, when the camera's not focusing on them, when they're not doing the dialogue, they kind of tend to fade into the background a little, but not these two. They are really in it.
Yeah, they definitely, you are correct. They're while they are not the focal characters, when the camera, especially on the 4-shot that has all 4 of them in there, they're all there being like the fullest the characters can be at that time. You see how, first of all, you still see that Frank and Freddy are struggling. They're getting sicker and all that. Their bodies are like, they're coming hunched over and all that. And like I said, when Frank walks towards Ernie, his arms are like stiff at his side and whatnot as he sort of almost shuffles over him, and how Freddy's head is just like hanging there. He's just so exhausted and looking in pain, and of course getting paler and grayer as the minutes tick on. So
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of the minute where you really start to notice how bad they look. Like, it's not the point where the film starts pointing it out to you, but it is the moment where you're like, oh, they look dead. They're starting to look actually dead.
Yeah, basically from the moment that they put down the stretcher of quote unquote weasels, yeah, they definitely are. They're moving very stiffly. They're moving very, yeah, they're pretty much on their like last legs sort of thing. They look like, yeah, exactly.
And I think that's one of the things that's very clever about the screenplay is a lot of times when you have like untalented or average writers, they'll either try to conceal a twist too much or they'll include some sort of contradictory information to keep you from guessing it early. But O'Bannon is like, no, I don't mind if you're smart enough to notice this stuff before I point it out. But I don't want you to be, I'm not going to point it out to you early. He really trusts the audience to be smart. And I love that about the movie.
Yeah, that is a really good point. It's like you're discovering the world, like what the rules are of this world while the characters are experiencing all that sort of thing, and there's no other way for you to do it. And yes, you can be very insightful. I mean, obviously on second watch of this movie you see everything a little more, but on first you're like going along, there might be something in the back of your brain going, something seems a little off and all that sort of thing, until yes, the big reveal in a couple of minutes. But yeah, it's definitely exactly what you said. It's and again, it's a credit to Dan O'Bannon's writing. It's just, he is a fantastic screenwriter, and the fact that he was able to allow himself to like bring this to a point where conceivably this could actually be happening. It's like everyone seems to be acting naturally. I mean, it like from the characters we're currently dealing with now, plus the kids in the cemetery, they all are acting like real life people. They don't seem to be too much of a caricature of anyone, because it's just, again, fantastic writing from Dan O'Bannon. So
And also production design, because I mean, O'Bannon came out of that side of things. He actually worked on Star Wars. He worked on Hodorowski's Dune that never got made. And you can see that he was taking away lessons from George Lucas of this idea of building the world as something lived in, so that, like, I mean, the mortuary looks like a real environment. And even the details, like back in the medical supply company, where you see the posters on the wall and things, it feels like a real lived-in workplace.
exactly,
And
yes.
and like in Alien, he knows that grounding it in these petty little everyday details makes it feel like someplace more real, so that when the fantastic stuff starts happening, you're walking right along with him.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Yeah, that's true. All right. So over on the commentary track, which is director and writer Dan O'Bannon and production supervisor William Stout, Dan O'Bannon talks about how much better Don Calfa looks with the bleached blonde hair, but that he probably wouldn't want to constantly bleach his eyebrows. William Stout mentions how different of a role this is for him and how he usually plays low-life bad guys. Dan adds that it's the movie industry and how we don't always get to do what they can, especially if we want to get paid for it. So a little bit of a cryptic sort of thing, but that's all that we have for this minute of the commentary track, talking about Don Calfa's look as Eddie.
Sounds like he was also maybe talking about himself a bit. You know, famously, he wanted to direct his entire career, but this was almost his only shot behind the camera.
Yeah. So from what I've taken from Dan O'Bannon's commentary track, it definitely sounds like Dan O'Bannon's just basically very outspoken about how his career went or was going and all that sort of thing. Because I believe this commentary track was recorded in 2002 for the original Blu-ray release. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2009. So wait, do I have that right? I'll enter the proper date later if I have it wrong. Pretty sure it's 2009. I don't have my Dan O'Bannon spreadsheet in front of me right now, but we'll go with that for now, and I'll edit in the proper answer later.
I don't think it could have been the Blu-ray though. I don't think Blu-ray was a
No,
format.
did I say Blu-ray? I
Yeah.
apologize. I meant to say DVD because that was the yes, it was the DVD. So yes, I stand corrected. Well, I sit corrected on that particular one. All right. So according to the script, which is a story and screenplay by Dan O'Bannon, and this is the revision from 1983 for October, which is based on a story and screenplay by John Russo, Rudy Rickey, and Russell Steiner. So again, we begin with the introduction of, we're just going to describe the area, which according to the script is the interior, mortuary, and bombing room night. So we pick up in the middle of Ernie's line where he says, so some lab rats got rabies. Take him to the pound. Bert clears his throat. Well, we can't, Ernie. You got to take my word for it. I'm asking you as a friend, Ernie. What the hell do you want me to do? Bert. Ernie, you have a crematorium. Ernie, you want to burn them? Bert. That's about the size of it, Ernie. Ernie. But that's cruel. Bert. It's the only way, Ernie. Ernie. You just can't burn them alive. It's too awful. At least let me kill them first. Ernie takes out his pistol. Ernie continues. Just carry them out of the parking lot and I'll put them out of their misery. Bert looks nervously at Frank and Freddie. Bert. Well, Ernie, I don't think that would work. Ernie. Why not? What do you mean? He looks back and forth at the three men who exchange a meaningful glance. Bert. Ernie, you got to swear to keep a secret. Ernie. I don't know. Bert. You have to swear or I can't tell you. Ernie. All right, I swear. Bert. Well, Ernie, it's not rabid weasels in the bags. And that's where we end this particular minute because the script doesn't actually have him say it's not rabid weasels in the script, but hey, we'll just go with that.
And
Okay.
I noticed that one of my favorite lines is ad-libbed where he says, "Can you keep a secret?" And Ernie says, "At this point, I honestly don't know."
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's a lot of stuff like that shows up between the script, which of course, if the script is written by Dan O'Bannon and him directing all that, it looks like he's allowing a lot of the actors to either interpret it either the day of or something, or they all decide, hey, let's try this or something like that. Or there's been a couple of moments where it's been just characters in the scene switching out lines sort of thing. Like one character says, like in the script, it says 3 lines, but then they split it up and give one of the other characters one of the middle lines or something like that and all that. So,
Which honestly surprises me a little because, he's kind of known from Alien for being extremely precious about his scripts, famously.
Yeah, definitely for a lot of the stuff that, like I believe it was Blue Thunder, the Roy Schreider helicopter surveillance movie, that he was quite disappointed in the final version of that after his script. But
well, and even Alien, which, everyone considers Alien to be a masterpiece, but he was like, they butchered my script. They should never have made Ash an android. It ruined the movie. Walter Hill doesn't know what he's doing. And, this is Walter Hill. He is a legendary screenwriter.
Yeah. So then we go to the work print comparison, which at this particular minute starts at 36:12 and goes to 37:12, whereas the particular minute we are dealing with right now goes from obviously minute 31 to 32. So it's a minute for minute exact what they shot originally and is in the work print is what we actually end up in the final version of the film. The only really interesting thing about it is because when they do the work print, there is no extra special effects put in. They just have the sounds of what happens in the moment. And if you listen to it when there's shots where you can see the wriggling bags, you actually hear the mechanics of the items inside the bags that are making the movement and all that. Are you aware of what is actually in those bags?
It is toy monkeys, isn't it? The symbol crashing
they're
monkeys.
the symbol monkeys where they just remove the symbols. And yeah,
Yeah, that we are about to get an entire horror movie about.
Yes, exactly. The Stephen King adaptation. I'm like, oh, but that's like a short story, isn't it? Sort of thing. How well, I mean, some of the best stuff are from Stephen King's short stories turned into full versions. But yeah, so it's basically they got a bunch of those wind up monkeys. They took out the symbols, and the bags wriggling around are those monkeys, which is just a fantastic thing. When I saw that little bit of trivia, I'm all like, that's quite clever.
And so simple too. So many of the effects that we really notice turn out to be just very simple in hindsight. I always
Exactly.
think of like scanners where the fake head blowing up. They tried all sorts of different ways to blow that head up, and then they're like, why don't we just shoot it?
Yeah, a good old shotgun to the back of the head to blow it over, and like, okay, sure, that is something that would definitely not happen nowadays. But yep, that's what you got to do when you got the late 70s. You got to do a half decent effect and all that. Yeah. All right, so that pretty much wraps it up for this particular minute. Nice and quick. Do you want to what is your life like horror wise there? Because I mean, this being a horror podcast and you coming from a horror podcast yourself, like what is it about horror that you enjoyed?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things about horror that I enjoy, and that's the thing I love about the genre is it's so wide a net. You can go to these really intense, just brutal movies like The Fly that are, the Cronenberg Fly that are
Yeah.
super affecting and dark and just emotionally traumatizing to watch. And then you can have something like Evil Dead 2, where it's just a Three Stooges film with tons of blood and guts and gore, and they coexist, and you can find something no matter what your mood to accommodate that interest.
That's true. That's true. That's actually a really good point. Now, are you more of like, because I started following horror because from an early age I was always interested in how movies were made. I always loved like when Entertainment Tonight in its early days would show you the behind the scenes stuff and all that. You saw actors acting like the actors and costume and all that sort of thing, and then all of a sudden they're in character sort of thing, or how stuff was made or how the costumes were put together. And when like I'm young enough to been like 6 when the original Star Wars came out, when all the making of stuff and all that was all, I was fascinated with that sort of thing. I wanted to see how the costumes were made and all that sort of thing. So when I got into modern day horror, because prior to that, horror was like Hammer horror was probably the most scary thing that I was watching. I watched the original like Universal Monsters and all that sort of thing, all the schlocky 50s and 60s stuff and all that. Night of the Living Dead was one of the later ones that I actually saw that was actually like more of a modern day sort of thing. But again, it wasn't until I saw like the Rick Baker effects of An American Werewolf in London that it was like, oh, I got to know how this is sort of done. So I go into, first of all, enjoying the scare of a horror film. And of course, you need to have a half decent story to enjoy said horror film, because it's kind of hard to enjoy, to sit there and watch a movie where you can't stand what's going on and all that sort of thing. But I'm always trying to analyze, seeing like, ooh, how was that effect done? Ooh, how is this done? What is your opinion of watching horror?
Well, I think for me, kind of the entry point was, I mean, for a lot of people of our generation, because it sounds like you're only just a couple years older than me. Um, I was 2 when the original Star Wars came out,
Right,
so
right.
I know where you're at there. For me, the entry point was Stephen King, and he was kind of the first person who taught me that horror can do other things besides scare. Like I remember reading Pet Cemetery when I
Mm-hmm.
was in high school, I think a freshman or junior, senior, no, sophomore in high school.
Right.
And Pet Cemetery, it's not scary to me. It's just intensely sad. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, this is not necessarily going to be about making me frightened. This is going to be about making me feel other things. And then as I read more Stephen King, I read his nonfiction book, Danse Macabre, where it's all about kind of analyzing the themes and the subtext and, everything that goes into the story. And I was already on my way to a lit crit degree. So that kind of steered me into this mindset of horror as something that can be analyzed and broken down and explored as literature, or in the case of movies, as media studies.
Right.
And even though I did wind up becoming very interested in all of the special effects stuff and the behind the scenes and all of the how to that went into it, a lot of it for me was kind of going into what is this filmmaker trying to say with the story. And
Gotcha.
like with this movie, it's all about, industrial accidents. The 80s were really bad for that as we deregulated. And so, this is O'Bannon saying all of these accidents start with a couple of idiots doing something stupid and then just compounding those errors more and more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That is definitely true. Yeah. We mentioned earlier that you have a podcast that is it is current, right? You're still doing a
Yep.
weekly podcast. And
Yep. I've actually got an episode coming out tomorrow on the Curse of La Llorona.
I do not think I know that one. Well, I might just have to tune in and see what it's all about. Do you want to talk to the audience about that sort of thing to get it out there?
Sure. So what I do is I trawl through half-price bookstores, specifically half-price books. We've got like 8 or 9 locations in my area, and I will kind of potluck grab movies out of there, and sometimes they'll be big, you know, notorious horror movies because you can always find someone getting rid of their copy of, Night of the Living Dead or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and sometimes they'll just be really weird, obscure ones that I'm looking at going, what is this? What actually is this? So yeah, I will pick up movies and like I say, sometimes it's The Changeling and from 1980 and sometimes it's The Children, which is a movie about radioactive kids that hug their parents to death.
Okay, all right. I mean,
And go ahead.
no, please go on.
And I go through them kind of beat by beat, summarize the plot and talk about the themes, any behind the scenes information I can find. Just, kind of break down the movie and give my thoughts on it. It's a one-man podcast. I'm always guilty about interrupting people. So this is the one spot in my life I don't have to worry about that.
And I like the concept of you going to find these bargain movies. Like that's where you get your movies from. It's not like you have a selection that you can just choose from and all that. No, you actually physically go out and like, oh, I think I'll talk about this one sort of thing, which is a great concept.
Yeah, one of my big things is I'm very big on physical media. We're living in an age where streaming is really kind of taking that away from us.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's very important to preserve physical media because it can't be removed at the whims of somebody, a movie
At a push
executive.
of a button.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Mike Flanagan talked about this, how when he did Midnight Mass, he made very particular music choices and he wants a physical copy to be out there so that in the event that some streaming person decides it's too expensive to maintain the rights to this and we should just slot in some library track, he's still got a record of the movie as he made it.
Right.
Or in
Yeah,
that case,
exactly.
the miniseries.
But, yes, exactly. Yeah. No, that's actually a great point. All right, so that's gonna about wrap this up for this particular minute. John, I want to thank you very much for joining me. This is very insightful, and hopefully I can have you on for a future minute because of just like this vibe works out really well. I mean, I like your insight and all that sort of thing, and you're also a fellow horror fan, so that's kind of great.
I mean, I loved being on. I love talking to you. You can tap me anytime you have a minute or two. From here on in, they're all great minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I keep saying that this roller coaster ride is about to hit that very top of the top crest, and like in a matter of like 2 or 3 minutes, we're just going to be going all downhill through the loop-de-loops. The corkscrews are right around the corner. So yes, yeah.
Although that is one of the things I love about this movie is it really is just go.
Mm-hmm.
The first 10 minutes the cold open happens and you're already into zombie action. There's
Exactly. Yeah.
not really any break in the
No.
tension.
Pretty much it. And the nice thing is there's no slowdown to this movie either. You don't have your boring, okay, let's just get to the next scene. No, you're like, okay, you're like, it's so beautifully paced. It's just, again, a credit to a well-written script, well-directed movie, and a fantastic cast. So
Exactly.
all right. So I want to, again, thank you, John. I want to thank the audience for joining me here for this particular journey. Again, I keep thanking the fact that one or two people keep joining this train every single week, which is a nice thing to see the numbers. Again, not spectacular numbers, but hey, I'll take any sort of thing. If anyone out there has anything to say about this particular minute, anything in the past or in the future, you can either drop a comment in the particular episode that you're listening to, or you can send us an email, planetgeekpod@gmail.com. We can continue the conversation there, or maybe even roll it into a future episode, or maybe even get you to be as a guest host like John here today, because he just happened on Tumblr mentioned the thing about how Freddie actually was a punk to begin with, and before you know it, he's a guest host. And I don't have anything else to say about that. And once again, John, thanks. Audience, thanks. And see you next Wednesday. You've just been listening to a Planet Geek production of Do You Want to Party? A Movies by Minute podcast of the 1985 The Return of the Living Dead. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Be sure to follow us on our social media platforms: Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, or Letterboxd. Search for Planet Geek Productions. X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. Or send us an email to planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Our closing music is provided by Night Chill. See the show notes for more details. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and farewell, fiends. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. Again, I just finished the final edits on the episode that goes up on this Wednesday, which actually has your information about the novel going into it. So it was all like, hey, it's kind of kismet that I'm actually recording with the guy that gave me that little bit of information. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that novel, it's a weird thing because Russo released two versions of it, one before the movie and one after, and they're completely different.
Oh, really? So the one that you were pulling from, is that after the movie?
Yes, he wrote a novel that was kind of proof of concept of, hey, we could do a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and then that turned out to be really unsatisfactory for Dan O'Bannon, who was hired as the screenwriter, and he threw most of it out.
Yeah, because I found something, I started reading it, and like the Bert character is like a farmer with some daughters and all that sort of thing at the very beginning. I'm like, I have no idea where this is going, but obviously when he did his own version of the script from the own version of the movie as a novelization, I guess is a better choice to know where the characters came from then. So
he just rewrote the whole thing and released it as a novelization under the exact same title, so
because that's not too confusing at all. All right, so I'm just going to do a quick little introduction. I'll introduce myself as the host, and then I'll introduce a little bit of a setup, and then you introduce yourself by however you want me to refer to you, or however you want the audience to know you. Then, like I said, we'll just chat a little about Night of the Living Dead, The Return of the Living Dead. Wow, that's the first time I've done that. The Return of the Living Dead, and then we'll just go into the episode. And when we're done that, we'll just chit chat about you and horror and your podcast stuff and all that sort of thing. I think I'm up to, like, where am I now? I think I've got like 7 or 8 of your podcasts already listened to and all that sort of thing. Of course, at the very beginning, when it's not, but the 25th, that was the first one I listened to. Your Return of the Living Dead was actually quite entertaining. It was actually very cool to, again, hear someone else's thoughts about the movie other than my own, which I've been listening to for the past couple of months.
Yeah, it's a good movie in that sense. You can bring a lot of interpretation to it.
Exactly.
It's not a dumb movie at all, even though it's very silly at times.
And the last page is, oh, come on, phone, work with me here. There we go. The magic of editing. Once I get this brought down to a better way.
I hear you. I probably chop about 20 minutes out of every one of my episodes.
I'm easily like a good 15. I can count out a good 15 minutes of just ums and ahs and pauses. Yeah, exactly. All right.
Love lines, all that.
Exactly. Yep.